Hey there, good morning. It's Friday, September 20th. We're 2/3 of the way through this month. Holy cow. And I'm Rob, that developer dad. So I'm building an application that's going to help me at my D&D table when the players ask, hey, what's this guy look like and what's their name and so on and so forth. And I've got it hosted up in Azure, just privately for now. And I've noticed that after a period of activity, Azure, in its great kindness to me, shuts the database down so that it's not consuming its my allotment of free time that the database can be running each month. And this is actually a good thing because it means I'm not going to end up paying for the database to sit there doing nothing. But the downside to that is it takes, 20, 30 seconds ish to spin back up. And by the time that happens, usually the code has timed out and throws an error all the way back up to the front end application. And I don't want that to happen to people that don't understand how computers and software work. What I'd like to do instead, when the database decides to take a nap and the code tries to say, hey, database, give me some data, and it's like, I'm sleeping. I want the code to keep poking the database until it wakes up and serves that information that's been requested. So for that, I was originally looking at Microsoft.extensions.resiliency, but after a little bit more research, it looks like that API is specifically tailored for HTTP requests or other like network type requests. Like if I were calling a remote API or what have you, that library would be suitable for this use case. But it turns out that it's not so great for database calls. So what I need to do is look at the Entity Frameworks code, because Entity Framework does include some resiliency features. And today we're going to dig into looking at what's required to leverage some of that code. So I'm going to flip over to the main screen. Now I pushed all of the metering changes to main yesterday, or not to main, but to GitHub, and I don't think I did the pull request dance. So let's double check right now. Go to GitHub, come into my repository. I've got 2 active branches. Yep, here's features, integrate usage metering to UI. It's 2 commits ahead of main. Let's go ahead and do a pull request right now. So no reviewers. I'm just going to assign myself project. We'll add it to the GM Tools MVP and adds the ability to track and display the logged in users' usage of the resources are controlled by the quota system. This does not yet enforce those quotas. So that's a to-do item for me, is to get those quotas to be enforced. All right, and we'll let it run the CI build. It'll just take a minute or so, just to make certain that nothing breaks. And I still need to get around to expanding on the number of tests that are in this system and all of that stuff, but that's a thing for another day. The important stuff, the dice rolling, that's been fully tested and verified. All right, so that's all good. I'm going to squash and merge, confirm the squash and merge. And yeah, I tend to be pretty draconian when I do this stuff. Delete the branch. I like to keep it tidy. So if I come over to code, come back to the branches, I see that main is now good. All right, so that's done. I'm going to flip back over here, go to main, and I've got some other branches locally that I need to get rid of, but I'll do that in a minute. Excuse me. First thing I'm going to do is I'm going to fetch all the recent changes. You can see that there is one incoming change. Pull it down. Great. I do want to clean and rebuild. Here we go. Off it goes. Crunching, 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 crunching. Crunch, 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 crunch. It's turning all of my C# code into intermediate language, which looks kind of like assembly language, but doesn't really. And I'm not doing any kind of native pre-compilation or anything like that, so it's not compiling it down to pure binary. But it looks like that is shiny and happy. So I am going to, first off, delete these dead branches because I don't need them locally. There is no corresponding branch up on the server. And all of those changes have been incorporated into the main branch. So we're going to add a new branch, and it's going to be feature/add resiliency to DB calls. And I'm going to hit create. Now, before we got started this morning, or before I, started pushing the buttons to make the stream happen, I actually had a little chat with my buddy Bing AI, Microsoft Copilot, and I told him that I'm looking into Microsoft Extensions Resilience. That's a new API that's part of dotNet 8, it was new last November. And I did discover in some other reading that, as I said, it's tailored for HTTP calls. So I need to use something built into EntityFramework Core to add this resilience. And I'm wondering what this error numbers to add is, but we'll find out. I'm actually going to Google that enable retry on failure. No, I'm not. I'm going to copy that, and I'm going to say, please tell me more about that. This is null. We'll use this as a default of transient. We'll use a default list of transient error numbers. Okay. Okay, interesting. By transient error numbers, you're talking about things like connection failures, timeouts, etc. If the data I'm trying to push into the database is invalid for the table definition, that isn't counted as a transient error number. Correct? Because if I try to pass data that's incompatible with the table I'm trying to write to, I want it to fail. I want it to come back and say, no, you can't do that. But if it's because the database is sleeping, or there's a temporary network partition that keeps me from being able to get my signal from here to here where the database is, then I definitely want it to wait a couple of seconds and try again. So connection failures, timeouts, deadlocks, problems that are temporary and often resolve themselves with a retry. So that's fantastic. The data you're trying to insert is invalid according to the table definition. So constraint violations, data type problems, too big for the column length, those are non-transient, and those will just flat out fail. So that is exactly what I want here. So I don't need to be in my workload provider. It looks like I can make this change all up here. So not in the metered usage access, because that's sort of my contract library. I need to go into the SQL Server implementation and into the context. So we'll go to the usage access DbContext. And let's bring Edge back up, because it did give me a nice tidy little code snippet here. Now this code snippet is specific to if I were setting up the DbContext out in program.cs, but that feels oogie to me. I don't want my root process host to have that much knowledge about dependencies that are more than a single layer out the stack. That makes me really uncomfortable, because ideally the only things that know about this dependent, like the database dependencies, are the components that care about those database dependencies. At this point, I don't need my AI module to be aware of the SQL database. I don't need my townsfolk generator module to be aware of usage tracking and stuff like that. I like to keep things very, very separate, and by pushing all of that stuff out to sort of the root process, even if the code doesn't have knowledge of those other components yet, it doesn't stop somebody who's, probably just trying to do their job, but hasn't fully understood the way the architecture works. It doesn't stop them from trying to inject these objects into into the other components that are supposed to know about them. And so that's sort of a downside to using the built-in dependency injection framework. It's not really well suited to complex multi-layered dependency trees, where you want the branches on that tree to be considered almost self-contained services of their own, or on their own thing. So let's see here. Use SQL Server, builder.configuration, SQL options. So this is when we're setting up the SQL options. Options builder.use SQL Server. And we pass the connection string. Builder.configuration connection string, SQL options gets use SQL Server. So I need to, here's the connection string, and then add a comma and say SQL options projects from SQL options dot enable retry on failure, like so. And now we'll set the parameters for that constructor. What even are you doing, you silly IDE? Here, we'll just back that up and go max retry count 5. 5 seems high. 5, fine. And max retry delay. We'll give that time span dot from seconds. And the literature says use 30. That feels excessive. Error numbers to add. We're going to pass this as null. That needs a comma. And that looks about right. Now, I do have a question about this max retry delay. So with the Control C. No, not Control C. I'm on the Mac side here. Control C. Great. That's what I need. With the max retry delay parameter, you're passing your example code is passing a 30-second time span. Does this feature use an increasing retry delay with that value as the maximum? Or is that the retry delay used on each subsequent attempt? Okay, good. It does use an exponential backoff strategy. So the first delay, it'll try again after a second. And then if that fails, it tries again after 2 seconds, 4 seconds, and so on until we've either tried as many times as I've told it to, or we hit that retry delay. So that's good. I think I can live with that. So I normally don't like to do this kind of thing that I'm about to do, where I just take it on faith. But unfortunately, once I spin the app up, the database is going to wake up, and I'm going to get one chance to test this. So I'm going to do this. I'm going to drop a breakpoint here. I've got another SQL Server thing in here. And I'm going to paste that retry code right here and drop a breakpoint. And then I don't have any other SQL Server access that I need to worry about. Here's MS Graph. I could probably use the resilience library here. And I could probably use the resilience library in the LLM access as well, because under the covers, it's making an HTTP call over to the OpenAI services. But this is sufficient for now. because it's the database service that's really been displaying the cranky behavior on application spin-up. So let's take it for a spin. And see what happens. I've not used this enable retry on failure capability before, so I'm curious to see how it works for me. First thing, we got to sign in. All right. And here's my NPCs. It's configuring. Just go. Get rid of the breakpoint. Engage. Make it so. And here it's trying to get the quotas. Engage. Make it so. Now, I'd really, really like to see a way to like pop a progress message out when it retries. But without events, I don't know that there's a way to do that. Using the retry capability in EF Core, is there a way to get some kind of feedback to my end user whenever a retry is made on a DB call attempt? Custom execution strategy. Ew. And we did get an error. But there it is. Logging framework like Serolog or the built-in logging in ASP.NET Core to capture and display retry information. Ugh, I don't like that. Execution strategy. Execution strategy in DbContext. Capture the log messages and display them to the end user. Write to a location accessible by the application, database, file, or in-memory store. I don't want to do any of that. Okay. But it certainly seems to have decided to behave itself a little better. Back to list. All right. Now, I'm not in love with the way it reports those error messages. And I'd like to do something about the loading screens. So, what I'm going to do, excuse me. So that doesn't really do much for me in terms of or the custom retry strategy or whatever, the custom execution strategy. I mean, it could get there, but I don't want to start registering events from my resource access or anything like that. So thinking. Yeah, if I really decide I want to do this custom execution thing, I'll do it later. I don't think I need it. However, I wonder if there's anything in the logs. Do we have the output? Yeah, we do. So here's all that stuff. Fetching the NPC list failed. There's a problem accessing the NPCs. Remote renderer warning. Blah, blah, blah. Unhandled exception, rendering component. Yeah. Anonymously hosted. This is all the spin up stuff, isn't it? Yeah. So here's this information, identity model, identity logger adapter. Yeah. Thread destroyed. Connection timeout expired. I don't think it used my retry logic at all. Yeah. Is there something I need to do when I call the DbContext methods to tell it to use that retry strategy? Not the custom one, but the one I set up on while configuring SQL Server. It doesn't look like it used it. Set it up in the context. Will automatically apply the retry logic to all database operations. Okay. I'd like to get some proof that it's doing that, but yeah. I'm just going to have to take it on faith. Okay. So that little yellow band at the bottom where it just says an error occurred, reload, that's kind of crappy. So let's look up please tell me more about handling and displaying exceptions in Blazor server. I'm getting feedback that some error occurred, but I'd like to have a little more information about that error. I'm already customizing the error description in the code, and I'd like to see that description. Okay, don't really care about error boundaries. Not yet, anyway. Create a custom error boundary. Blah, blah, blah. Override on error async. Okay. Global error handling, application builder, blah, 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 blah. Display detailed errors. You can modify the main layout.razor to include detailed error messages. So, in here, that's what I'm after. So let's take a look at that. This is sort of outside of the scope of the name of this thing, but I think it's still well within where we want to be. So let's come down to layout and we'll look at main layout.razor here real quick. So div ID Blazor error UI. Okay. An unhandled error has occurred. Reload, dismiss. And what I'm going to do is this at la 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 la. Well, first thing we'll do is we'll span it. And I'm just going to say at context dot. Oh, stop that. Dot error dot message. That at context variable doesn't seem to be there. But, you know, what the heck? Let's see if it'll spin up. We'll fool around and find out. Nope. Doesn't like that. Excuse me. So, pardon me. Golly. Hang on a sec. Aftermath, man. All right, so at context. Isn't a variable that is available in main layout. Boy. Even is it talking about? Pardon me. Goodness. La. I'm getting really sick of this nonsense. All right, so we've got all this stuff. What do we have access to here? Activator utilities. Do I have access to a context? Is there some context object that it's going to let me have access to? Context callback, converter. Nope, doesn't look like it. All right. Doesn't look like there's a neat, tidy, out-of-the-box way of dealing with this situation. An unhandled error has occurred. I'd really love to get some actual useful information into there. Excuse me. What if I add code and override on error? No, I thought I saw some sort of override on error async nonsense. Protected override task. base.on error async exception. What's this complaining about? No suitable method found to override. Oh. Duh. So I have to create an error boundary. Yeah, I don't like any of these solutions. Those are all horrible. Those are all terrible. Build, rebuild solution. All right. So I've got the resilience in there theoretically. Can't quite tell if it's resilienting or not. Pull this up, bring this over to the other screen. Apple T portal. I'm just going to go see if the database has gone back to sleep in the time that I've been coughing my brains out and messing around with this stuff. Because if it's gone back to sleep, oh no, it's still online. Okay. All right. It's still online, so there's no sense in trying to test it some more. Well, heck. I've got that. Let's take a look at our quasi roadmap here. Implement the permissions policy and apply it to the pages that already exist, and it'll be ready for future pages. I got it. Fix up the home page, whatever. I got to add the NPC filter controls this afternoon, or at some point. Save button on the random result view, that's in place. I do want to save the character immediately when they bring back the AI description. This is set. Changes and updates public, help with sections for paid, unpaid, and guests. Got to get around to payment processor stuff. Add ability to delete an NPC. Yeah, we got to do that too. And let's see. I think this afternoon we're going to do this. I'm working here, overlay for when the app's running. An async task. I had one before and it was okay, but it wasn't fantastic. Trigger the save completes, disable the button. Yeah, we want to do that. This involves need an unsaved changes flag on this screen. Working here overlay for when the app is running a longer async task. So this, I think, is going to be what I play with this afternoon. And because I've gotten the Entity Framework resiliency stuff in there, and my body's decided that I'm going to be coughing like a coughing person every couple of sentences, I think I'm going to call this a stream a little early today, just to try and get this mess in my chest mitigated somehow, because it's really bothersome to me, and I can't imagine it's pleasant for y'all to listen to me coughing my brains out and turning into Gollum on stream. So yeah, I think having accomplished what I want to accomplish, I'm gonna go ahead and where are all these changes? Main layout razor. We're gonna undo that change. Goodbye. Yes. Go away. So usage access, DbContext, boogity 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 boo. Yeah, those are the changes that I wanted. Adds retry configuration to the entity framework DbContext objects to enable retries on should transient errors occur. Commit and push. Boop. All right. So this afternoon, I'm going to come back and we're going to start thinking about some sort of I'm working here overlay type thing for when a longer running process is happening. So until 1 o'clock this afternoon, take care of yourselves. Stay away from COVID. Nobody wants to catch this. It's not fun. And drink water, touch grass, eat food, and be kind to yourself. Happy coding.